Hey, everybody. We are live, Poduty and News at the Podcast Theater on Corbett Street at Harrison's in downtown Tarentum. We have an impressive, amazing guest joining us tonight for 6 news stories. Dave Jackson, welcome to the show.
Dude, so happy to be here. Ready to have some fun.
And we're not too far away. We were just talking before the show. You're in Akron. I'm in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh just had a terrible weekend in Cleveland.
I'm as shocked as you are, probably. Because the one thing the Browns can do is find a way to lose. And I was really surprised.
Well, Dave, I got just one question for you.
Oh?
Do you know what time it is?
It is time for Poduty in the News, my friend.
What time is it? What time is it? It's time for Poduty and the News. Poduty and the News. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. Poduty and the News. Poduty and the News. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage.
Dave Jackson, welcome to Poduty in the News. It's such an honor to have you here tonight. Just a legacy in podcasting, Hall of Fame inductee, School of podcasting since 2005.
Yeah, we would chisel them out of stone back then. But yeah, it's been fun to watch. I mean, it was in 2005, because everybody goes, why is the Hall of Fame full of old white guys that are all nerdy? And I'm like, because we used to be young white guys that were nerdy and we figured out podcasting. But I mean, that was pre-WordPress, really pre-Apple. You know, you were hand rolling your RSS feed. It was, I remember I would record my podcast. I used a thing called Feed for All that I would FTP my feed to get updated. I would update my website in Dreamweaver. It was just 37 different tools to make a podcast. And so now it's, a piece of cake, and you can buy, I got a P4 here. This thing's like less than $200. And, it's just amazing how far we've come.
Yeah, I remember using like FeedBurner to try to syndicate my feed, and even Google Reader, just trying to subscribe to blog posts and trying to find podcasts and get that content delivered to you. But before the algorithm did it automatically, I think the internet used to be more like a treasure hunt. You used to
big time.
You used to be able to go out and try to find these things, and you'd uncover all these things that it'd just be amazing.
Yeah, I remember when a friend of mine had just come back from this marketing convention. And he said, hey, and again, totally dating myself. He goes, you know how you missed the MySpace boat? And I'm like, yeah, don't rub it in. And he said, I've seen the next big thing. It's podcasting. And I was like, okay. So I go to Google and I type in podcast, and there's like 1.5 pages. And I go, wait, how do you spell this again? He goes, it's podcast, and I go, dude, there's nothing on this on the internet. And I finally figured out how to kind of paper clip one together and some rubber bands and, MacGyvered one. And then I just remember I uploaded a file, and there was this software with a big picture of a lemon on it called Juice. And I downloaded it. And the first thing was I heard Adam Curry's voice. And I was like, hey, I know that guy from the MTV Headbangers Ball. But I put my feed in and I saw the download come down. And that's when the light bulb went off. I went, oh, I see what this does. And I was pretty much hooked. And then probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, I put out a couple episodes, and a guy from Nuremberg, Germany sent me voicemail. So number one, I'm in the middle of Cowtown, Ohio, and some guy on the other side of the planet, not only found my show, but liked it enough to send me a voicemail. And that's when I grabbed my flag and I'm like, I claim podcasting in the name of Dave. And it's been fun ever since.
You're hooked. I mean, you mentioned Dreamweaver back then. I can even recall, people call this now cowboy coding, but I remember going on Dreamweaver, editing my index.html file, and then just publishing it in real time, not even working in a playground environment. You would just edit and publish the real time on the web and just hope for the best.
That's it. Cross your fingers and hope.
Well, tell us a little bit about School of Podcasting. Over 1,000 podcasters have been helped by this program, and Great podcast, great community. If people want to connect with that and really meet new podcasters, tell us a little bit about the School of Podcasting.
Yeah, it's at its core, it's courses, a community, and consulting. So I've got everything from planning your podcast to how to grow it, how to monetize it, how to get in Apple and Spotify and all that fun-filled stuff, all the points in between. And then you've got consulting. So every month you get 5 hours of one-on-one consulting with me. And then the community is really what keeps people. So every Friday we do lunch with Dave, and then we do one on the weekend. We do one on a Wednesday night. And it's just everybody sharing what they're doing and what's working. And you've got everybody from accountants to ex-pastors to ex-military. It's just a wide range of everybody, and they're dog groomers. And we're all just like, hey, I tried this, or who are you using for merch, or whatever it is. And then we also, I think one of my favorite things is we do what we call listener parties. And that's where somebody, especially like your first episode, and we stream it live and everybody listens. And if you get confused or bored, or if you really like it, you just raise your hand. You're like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about here. Hey, that was really cool how you tied in a personal story into this to, bring it in or whatever. And so, because it's one thing to listen to somebody's show, but when you wanted them to laugh or cry or whatever. And when we're all just sitting here deadpanned and we're supposed to be laughing, well, now you know that because you can see us. And at first people are like, I don't know if I want to do this. I'm like, look, you're going to put your show out to the public anyway. Why not get some feedback before you put it out there? Because so many podcasters don't. And then they just keep putting out, not that it's bad. It's kind of meh, like, okay, that's all right. But if we can point out that, hey, my favorite is like, you have a great theme song, but there are a lot of times where people just play music and they're like, you just hit play and it's and like for 30 seconds. And I'm like, what? Am I supposed to get up and dance here? What's going on? And so it's just honest feedback to help shape it, because we're all there with the main goal of just making content that engages their audience. So it's a lot of fun. I've been doing it for over 20 years now, and it's always fun seeing people come in. And I think the reason why podcasting has such a great community is because there are companies out there now putting out absolute AI slop, and we want to help make as many good podcasts as possible, so that when we do get that person, my best friend just started listening to podcasts. I'm like, where you been? And he said, I found a really good one. He goes, but man, there are so many really bad shows out there. And I go, yes, there are. So it's a lot of fun.
And that's some of my pet peeves about some of these apps is things I've heard people talk about is we need some sort of filtering, if not to just get rid of the AI slop, but a new podcaster, your friend just came to podcasting. Nothing is worse than you really get invested into a show and you go back through their catalog and the last published episode was 2023.
Right.
They haven't done anything. So I really wish that we were working towards a way to really filter out so that we could only see active shows. I think that would really help the directories. It would help with the user experience. It would help with discovery.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tackle that. I'm not a tech guy.
Yeah, it'd be great to show me shows with more than 5 episodes, because there's so many that, like, there's one episode and somebody going, I don't know, is this on? Oh, it's making the lights blink. What do we do? Like, and then it sits there forever. Yeah. So it'd be great if we could filter that out.
5 episodes. Last published was this year. I'd be so excited to just have that filter. Last published date was in 2025.
Yeah.
It would make a huge difference in discovery.
Yeah. Because I know they say if you make it past, I think it's 8 or 10, you're more than likely to keep going. But a lot of shows, in fact, Riverside just put out a stat that I forget what, it was something ridiculous, like 44% of podcasts don't make it past like 5 episodes or something like that. And that's it's pretty insane stat.
Yeah, the drop is very steep, even at 10. So this show I got to 35. I even tore my Achilles over the summer, had to have Achilles surgery, haven't missed a week, and we're off to the races. I'm having more fun doing this show than I've done anything in the past 10 years. So
nice.
We're going to keep it going.
Yeah, well, good on you for pushing through with the Achilles, man. That's no fun.
It's funny you say pushing because I was actually pushing on a skateboard when I popped that sucker.
That'll do it.
Well, let's get into a controversial topic. Netflix presses play on live podcasts. We're going to file this under platforms and distribution, and it comes to us from the Hollywood Reporter. Netflix is officially stepping into live podcasting starting January 11th with a live episode of the Bill Simmons podcast, streaming Sunday nights on Netflix before living on Spotify and all major audio platforms. This move is part of a broader partnership with Spotify's studio arm and The Ringer, and it signals Netflix's growing push into video podcasts as it competes more directly with YouTube. With additional shows from iHeartMedia and Barstool becoming Netflix exclusive, this isn't an experiment, it's a platform strategy shift that could reshape how audiences discover and experience podcasts. So this is the doozy of one that we've been talking about on this show. I've heard you talk about it on School of Podcasting, especially the last 2 episodes, and we've heard this on Pod News. You know, Netflix is really making this push, just like even TikTok is doing, and Spotify is doing, and YouTube is doing, trying to maybe reclaim or take over what a definition of a podcast is behind their paywall or in their ecosystem. And in this case, this is very similar to that. They want to have that exclusive deal. And is this really a podcast? I guess that's what we're going to get into first.
Yeah, this is where I always say, from my standpoint, being kind of a technical guy, I go by the technical definition, and that is a podcast is audio, video, or yes, even a PDF delivered via RSS. And I am of the no RSS, no podcast. And so when they say, oh, it's going to be a live podcast on Netflix, I'm like, no, it's a podcast. Now that's a live stream. It's a live show, but no RSS, no podcast. And Steve Goldstein is a friend of mine. I've known him forever, but he keeps redefining it. And my question is, and I don't mean disrespect to Steve, but like, why are we listening to Steve? Why? And in fact, I asked him, after I threw him under the bus on my one episode, I got on Zoom with him and I said, like, why don't you accept that, no RSS, no podcast? And he's like, well, I'm surrounded by a bunch of Gen Zers. And he's like, they all think YouTube is a podcast. And the problem, my background is in teaching. And so with me, I think everything can be fixed with education. I'm like, oh, we just need to get them in a classroom and go, here's what a podcast is. YouTube is a show. It's a channel. That's what that is. And here, these guys in Apple and Spotify, these are podcasts. So, why do we have a different name for books than magazines, than TV shows? It's a different format. It's a different name. And it drives me bonkers that, Dan Granger over at Oxford Road has spent most of 2025 going, so what's a podcast? And I'm like, why? Here's the definition. Why don't you accept this definition? And it drives me bonkers. So, and then the thing that James Cridlin pointed out, because he's a nerd too, he somehow got into the back end of Netflix and was able to see how many views those shows are getting. And his show is Pod News Weekly Review gets more downloads than 20% of the shows on Netflix. And I went, so we all get like, ooh, Netflix, which, hey, anytime I can get more exposure from my show, that's fine. It's great. But, it's not all that. And then the thing that I just scratched my head on is the exclusiveness, because when all those shows went on Spotify and they were exclusive, and then when their thing came up to renew, a lot of them said, no, thank you, because you want your audience to follow you to Spotify. But in my opinion, Spotify's app, I love it for music discovery, but for podcasting, not so much. And so I didn't follow anybody over to Spotify. I'm like, well, there's only, 200,000 other shows I could listen to. So I'll be interested to see what happens. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you said something on a recent episode of School of Podcasting about, YouTube is shouting from the top of the mountain, we have podcasts now. Spotify is, we have video podcasts. And what's happened over the last couple of years is there's really hasn't been an argument to counter that. And while they get the big media, the big press, they're using it to, maybe move the stock number a little bit. They're able to get that coverage. And people like myself, even though I disagree with what YouTube is calling a podcast, I don't have the same voice and coverage. So for these last couple years, they've just kind of gone unchecked trying to tell us what the definition of a podcast is.
And nobody pushes back on the shenanigans. The YouTube changed the definition of a view of a short to 0 seconds. So if I go to a button and I go and tap it, there you go. That's a view. And then the CEO came out and said, I think it was 2 billion views in a month. And I go, well, that's really easy to do when a view is 0 seconds. And I was like, and I'm like, is nobody putting these two together? They just changed the definition and look at us, 2 billion views. I'm like, oh, this is driving me crazy.
We're growing year after year. And let's go to a real live podcast. We'll go to our second story today. And this one's going to be live from the CES showroom floor, coming to us from Ecamm Live. We mentioned Ecamm a little bit earlier today. And if there's anything I love, it's a meta subject. For example, this is a podcast about live podcasting recorded live. And here we got from Ecamm on an upcoming live stream of The Flow, host Katie Fox sits down with Dave Hamilton and we'll talk about podcasting live from the showroom floor of the Consumer Electronics Show. Instead of just attending CES, Dave reported live from it, navigating noisy environments, fast-moving stories, and constant tech distractions. The conversation pulls back the curtain on what it actually takes to podcast live at a massive event, what tech trends truly mattered, and why experience and context beat shiny new gear every time. And this story just caught my attention just because of the meta. He's already doing a live podcast from the showroom floor. Now they're going to do a live stream talking about the live podcast from CES, and just a great way to kind of pull technology together and really expand kind of what this is an example of expanding what the definition of a podcast can be, because they're doing all kinds of things. They're doing news reporting, they're doing a recap, they're doing an interview, a live stream, all at one time to make a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave Hamilton's a good guy. I got to hang out with him at either Podfest or Podcast Movement. He'd been around forever. But yeah, it's kind of, and this is kind of where Steve Goldstein is going for. He likes to use the word podcast, but his point is that, 20 years ago, you couldn't have a live broadcast. And 20 years ago, you didn't have this. And now it's not a matter of, if I do a live stream and I record that, I can now do anything I want with that. So I've got a live show while I'm doing it. I can take it out like you do and put the video out on YouTube. I can put the audio out as a podcast. I could put the video out as a podcast, but who's got the budget for that when YouTube is free? And then I can have it transcribed and turned into a blog post. So I get when Steve talks about it's a fluid area, that you aren't just video, you aren't just print, and you can kind of go wherever you want. So I get his point on that. I just push back when he goes, yeah, that book is now a podcast. I'm like, no, you had me and you lost me, Steve. So I get it. But it's the thing that's just nuts about that is to be doing it from, a floor of some show. That just wasn't possible 20 years ago. The Wi-Fi wasn't there. The camera would have weighed 400 pounds on your shoulder. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, what used to cost $1 million to build a television studio, I'm not saying this is the quality of a television studio, but I built something, $5,000-$6,000 isn't too far off from what took millions of dollars 20 years ago. So the technology, like you're mentioning, has grown so fast that anybody has access to do this. That doesn't mean necessarily everybody should do it. It just means that you have the ability, that you are so connected to the rest of the world now. The cost, the barrier to get into this is so low that you could be live from a conference floor, and then you could do a follow-up broadcast, bringing in Ecamm, a few weeks later doing a recap.
I was talking to somebody right before I came on here, a member of the School of Podcasting that's in Australia, and he sounded like he was sitting right next to me. I'm going to jiggle my cables here. I keep hearing that. That's driving me nuts. But it's that's amazing. And like, here's another, this is the new Zoom PodTrack P4, and it's under $200. And 5 years ago, this would have been $1,000. It's just crazy.
Speaking of great technology, when community and beer is the headliner, this comes to us from I Like Beer, the podcast. And this is what on location podcasting looks like when it's done right. The I Like Beer, the podcast went live on site at Virgin Beer Company during its massive 50 brewery anniversary celebration. Rather than just covering beer, the episode asks a bigger question. How does a brewery become so respected that 50 of the nation's top brewers show up to celebrate? The answer isn't hype or production tricks. It's community, relationships, and telling the story from inside the experience instead of after the fact. And this is like what we preach in live podcasting. It's about community. It's about bringing people who are like-minded together. And here's a brewery that's so well respected that 50 other breweries want to come hang out with them, do some live shows, and just celebrate beer together.
This beer community, I don't consider, there are tons of podcasts about podcasting, and there are other podcast consultants. And I don't know that I've run into anybody where they're like, oh, well, I can't talk to him because he's my competition. Because again, we're all, our primary goal is to help everybody make the best shows there are, because when we get that new listener, we don't want them to go, I don't know, it's just some guy and his buddy that he grew up with, and they're both, laughing about orange Gatorade. I don't know what the inside joke is, but they thought it was funny, so we're trying to help people make great shows. And it's just amazing that like some of my best friends are my competition. And because who else am I going to nerd out about podcasts with than another podcast consultant? So this is just a great example of the power of community, embracing other people. Because I'm sure that those people that are coming to that brewery are learning things. You're kind of helping your competition. But on the other hand, I'm sure there's really bad, breweries, and they want people to go, wait, do you want a Miller? Do you want to try some of this draft? And they're like, oh, I don't want none of the draft stuff or home brewed stuff. Well, if it's all good, then you have more chance of people going, yeah, let me try that new stuff. So I just think it's a great idea.
And like you mentioned, the best part about podcasting is meeting other podcasters, even if you're talking about the same thing. Like, I'm in Pittsburgh. I've met 70 different sports podcasts in this town, and they all know each other, and they all share ideas and tips and guests. And it's such an amazing collaboration for people who are doing the same thing that you want your peer to succeed. It's almost that rising tide lifts all ships. If we get 3 or 4 great Pittsburgh podcasts, then the other ones start to get traction too. And podcasting is just one of those things where the more you help each other, the more other people help you, and the faster you grow and become a better podcaster.
Yeah, I forget what the phrase is, all boats rise in high tide or something like that, but it's a case where we want everybody to benefit as more listeners come in. So absolutely.
So the more we benefit, the more chaos there is. And if those of you watching, this was a live stream podcast from, it looks like a radio station that did an after show. They called it Showvertime. This is chaos as content. This is kind of the area I like to thrive in. I grew up skateboarding for 20 years. I was into punk rock music and hip hop music in the 90s. So like chaos is at the center of my core. And this is when a live show is the joke. This comes to us from K-Rock on YouTube. This is what happens when a podcast fully commits to the live experience. Klein Alley Show took their show on the road with Showvertime, a recording live from Hollywood Park Casino. The result wasn't polish or perfection. It was chaos, audience participation, bad bets, questionable decisions, and a room full of people who showed up knowing anything could happen. It's a reminder that for some podcasts, the appeal isn't tight scripting or clean production. It's unpredictability, shared experience, and letting the audience feel like they're part of the madness. Something I love about podcasting that you don't get with any other genre. With comedy, you don't get a unique experience every show. Comedians tend to work on material. They're trying to put a show together, a set together, and they perform that content in multiple stages, multiple nights, night after night, until they get that perfect joke. And when you listen to musicians, when they play a city, they go to the next town and they play the same set at the next town. But when you go to see a live podcast, and this is a beautiful example of that, the only time in the history of the world that you will see that performance is that night in that moment. They won't go do this show tomorrow night at a different casino. They only perform that one time and one time only. And to me, that's the magic of live podcasting. The beauty of getting up on a stage in front of people is it's a once in a lifetime experience every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you ever watch the movie Private Parts about Howard Stern, and there's a line in there and they're like, okay, well, X amount of percentage of the people love Howard. Why? Can't wait to hear what he's going to say next. There was this element of like, we're just not sure what he's going to do. He's crazy. And then he's like, great, but what about the people that hate him? They're like, oh, number one reason they listen, can't wait to hear what he's going to say next, because they were getting ready to go crazy. So yeah, that element of, I wonder what's going to happen next is a great way to suck in your audience. I always say, the ingredients that you have to play with, you either want to make them laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. If it's information they can't get anyplace else, which is kind of what this live show is, that's really in there. And then if you can save them time or save them money. So when you start combining those, like John Oliver has that show on HBO last week tonight. Well, he makes me laugh. He makes me think. He gives me information for whatever reason I can't get anyplace else, and then, you mix those all together and you got a pretty good show. And this is just a great example. And then the fact that it's live, and my guess is that audience is engaged throughout the show and probably yelling things out. I had a friend of mine that ran sound for, I think it's Pod Save the Queen, which is a political show. And they were selling out theaters, like making like 20 grand a night, not too shabby, because they were selling tickets in this theater in San Francisco. And he said, what the weirdest part was, he goes, their audience is there. There's no ads. It's a live podcast. And it was like Freebird at a Skinner concert. People, come on, play Freebird. They're like, come on, do Blue Apron, do Better Help. Come on. And they're like, guys, there's no ads tonight. And so finally they're like, all right, we'll just got to give the audience what they want. So live is, it's a whole different beast than recording at home, things like that. So it's a different skill, but boy, when it's rocking, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, and obviously the K-Rock, this is probably built off of a radio show. These are probably morning DJs that this is their environment, and they're bringing that energy. They're bringing their fan base, and to be able to pull something off like this is just incredible. And there's some crazy things that I listen to parts of it, and they pull people up from the audience. I think they offered to give somebody a haircut if they could cut his hair any way they wanted in exchange for some tickets to an upcoming concert. So you never know what to expect, and that's really keeping the audience on their toes, keeping them guessing to what's coming next. That's the best way to put together a live show.
Yeah, and when it's a radio crew, most of people are listening to that in their car, and now I get to actually see what they look like and that whole aspect. I remember in the early days of podcasting, Jay Moore's a comedian. He was in Jerry Maguire and, did some acting. And he said how he noticed, he goes, it wasn't the advertising. It's the fact that I used to have clubs and all of a sudden I could sell out theaters and people would start shouting out things he had said in the podcast. So that's how he got his raise, by just having a more engaged audience that started showing up to shows.
Yeah, speaking of showing up to shows, crossing borders. When podcasts outgrow their borders, podcasting's global moment is on full display as Tony and Ryan podcasts take the stage at Radio Days Europe in 2026. What started as a massively popular Australian show has clearly outgrown national borders, earning them a spot at one of the world's most influential radio and audio conferences. In a conversation with fellow Aussie Craig Bruce, the focus isn't just on their success, but on how podcasting and radio continue to borrow from each other and why live on-stage conversations are becoming essential to the medium's future. Radio Days Europe is nothing to sneeze at. That's one of the huge conferences in this genre. Like we mentioned earlier, part of their entertainment for the event is doing live podcast recordings as the entertainment. So these are things to think of down the road. How do you fit in there? And how does your podcast fit into even smaller conferences or smaller community events. Is there a place for you to meet people like you and perform your podcast?
Yeah, it's great. And I know Australia has, I forget, it's something in Andy, but there's a duo in the morning and they take their radio show and put it out as a podcast. And it's way more, I mean, the beauty of podcasting is it's time shifted. So if these are like morning guys, and you're like, I don't want to get up at 6 a.m. and listen to the radio, but I can check out their podcast later, and it's hugely popular. So it's and the fact that it's worldwide. So, you know, if we go back 20 years ago, these people would have a radio show in Australia, and that's kind of it. And, you know, maybe if you're in your Melbourne, you might be able to pick up the station. And now it's worldwide. And so they've got this whole thing, and that's when you get the opportunities to speak at places like this. I always say a podcast helps you build relationships, and those relationships lead to opportunities, and the opportunities lead to more relationships, and it just turns and turns and turns. And so you just never know. I mean, I many moons ago, I was the head of podcasting at the New Media Expo, and I hired Pat Flynn to speak. And so I got to know Pat then, and I've known him through the years. And fast forward, I'm at Podfest, and lo and behold, there's Pat Flynn, and I'm talking to Pat, and another friend of mine popped up, and then Michael Stelzner is a guy that runs Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, and he came up, and we were just talking podcasting. So I was doing my, you're on my jam now. I'm going to talk about podcasting. And when we got home, Michael Stelzner called me and said, hey, it was great meeting you. Would you be interested in speaking at Social Media Marketing World? So it's those relationships that lead to opportunities, and as long as you take advantage of that. So I'm here to tell you, these people that are going to be speaking at Radio Days Europe, that you don't realize that if you're a keynote for let's say it's 20 minutes, a half hour, for 30 minutes, you are Radio Days Europe. That's a huge responsibility, and it always just blows my mind when I go and I see somebody speak for the first time, and you can just tell they're just winging it. Like they put the slides together last night, and I'm like, wow, you're really blowing the opportunity here. But yeah, Radio Days Europe is one I've never been to, but I wouldn't mind going.
Yeah, a lot of times, unfortunately, some of the bigger acts, they just get hired. They're the reason why those events are selling tickets, and they show up and it's like a Q&A. They don't have anything prepared, and it's just a one-on-one Q&A with maybe the host. But examples like this, where this is a podcast where you had mentioned 20 years ago, you were just going to be on Australia, and nobody outside of Australia would have heard you. But now, because of distribution, because they're able to get out there, they're going to be up on stage for 30 minutes. And then think of the people that they're in front of while they're up on that stage. So to get to that level, to be invited to be on the main stage, but then all those other industry connections you're in front of, and you're showcasing yourself. It's almost like a calling card or your resume for future jobs and gigs.
And it also works the other way around. Dr. Emily Morse does a show called Sex with Emily, and it got really popular. And when Howard Stern, let's see, who did she replace? It might have been, Howard Stern had gone off in California because he went to satellite radio. And so they brought in Adam Carolla, and they brought in Dr. Emily. And she was on radio for quite some time, but unfortunately, like as radio does, they switched their format and she was gone. But then she got a job on Bravo, on the Bravo channel, doing TV. And so the whole time she's kept her podcast. Why? Because it's the entertainment business, and eventually something's going to go left of center, but she maintains her audience through her podcast. And then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm now going to be, writing a book, or I'm doing this or that. So the podcast is the thing, the constant through all these other opportunities. So so you never know what's going to come about.
It's the one asset that she owns, most likely owns, has the most control over, doesn't have to answer to TV executives, doesn't have to answer to radio executives. This is hers. She built this media asset, and she controls it and owns it and can release it however she wants. And
Aisha Tyler is an actress. She was, I think it was Ross's girlfriend on Friends for a while, but she's also a director. She was in, it was on FX, Archer. She was the voice in Archer, one of them. And she was at Podcast Movement, and she did every aspect of her podcast. She edited it. She posted it. At the time I worked at Libsyn, so she would upload it to Libsyn. And she said, the one thing, just what you just said, she said, the one thing I love about my podcast is it's mine.
Yeah.
She goes, look, she goes, yes, it's my house, but it's really my house and my husband's house. And it's not really our house because we haven't paid for it yet. She's like, but this is mine. She goes, and if I want to make it longer, I can make it longer. If I want to make it shorter, if I want to bring it again, she's like, it's my show. I can do whatever I want. And you can't say that about a whole lot of stuff. So absolutely, it's yours and you can do whatever you want.
And speaking of doing whatever you want, Bunny XO brings live podcast to TPAC to support Memoir. I'm going to file this under I don't understand anything I just read. I don't know what I just thought, but here we go. We have live podcasting continues its move into major performing arts venues as Bunny XO brings her Dumb Blonde podcast to the Tennessee Performing Arts Center this February as part of her stripped down, unfiltered, and unapologetic tour. This isn't a regular book tour. It's a high energy, on-stage podcast experience built around storytelling, humor, audience interaction, and personal reflection. It's another clear example of podcasts evolving into full-scale live events to blend performance, intimacy, and brand storytelling in front of a ticket-buying audience. I also learned that she's Jelly Roll's wife.
I was going to say, I think if I believe I know this to be that, yeah, that's his wife.
And we've seen this a couple times, whereas people were releasing books in the past, they would do morning talk shows, they would do morning radio, they would go around and try to get coverage. But we're seeing people build tours now around book releases, and they're tying their podcast audience into doing these live shows, and they're releasing the book and going on tour. So now they're selling tickets, they're selling books, they're selling merch. It's become this whole new element, a whole new way to promote things that you're releasing is to take your podcast out on tour and release a book.
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned that, I'm like, oh, this is a book signing in, almost a live performance, close. And why wouldn't you? Because I remember once, I'm a guitar player. I got to meet Ted Nugent and he signed a book for me. But they didn't charge me to come into the Borders, right? I just stood in line and I had to buy a book for him to sign. But why not charge tickets to come in and watch me probably read some of my book, do a little Q&A, probably have, and that might be one where they have kind of a preset kind of presentation that they might do. And then at the end, of course, I'll be signing books in the back. And so you get them coming in and you get them coming out, and that gets real profitable because it's not like it's a KISS show where you got, 4 trucks hauling, lights and fire and stuff. It's like, I need a microphone and a chair to do that. So it gets really profitable really quick. So, but it is funny that they're calling it a live podcast. It's like, well, it's a one-man or a one-woman show in this case. Then we're going to record it and probably put it out as a podcast. And if not, the reason people are there, I'm going to assume that Mrs. Roll has a podcast of some way. So
Mrs. Roll, that's probably how most people would dress her as. And yeah, if it's recorded and released as a podcast, then this 100% falls into this was a live podcast recorded in front of an audience and released as a current episode. A lot of times we've had stories where big podcasts have done live experiences with the intent to not record it just as a reward for their fans. And that's great too. So you've built an audience, you built a community, and you're still going to do a performance that's live, but it's not going to be part of it. You got to be there to get the full experience.
That's it. That's the old, supply and demand. And if you want to get, there's only one time to get it. And that's where you do the fun thing where you have to confiscate everybody's phone so they can't record it. It's my favorite thing. I remember when Sarah Koenig from Serial was speaking at Podcast Movement, and they had all these signs like no recording. And I'm like, you do know you're in a room full of podcasters, right? I'm like, the chances of no recording are like slim and none. But I know now comedians, they have a thing where they'll confiscate your phone and you get it back at the end of the show and that whole 9 yards. So,
well, Dave, this has been so much fun, exceeded every expectation I had about this moment and getting through this show and enjoying this time with you. Let's go back one more time. School of Podcasting. Let's make sure everybody knows it's not just a podcast, it's a community. It's a great way to connect with other podcasters. And how can people reach out, connect with you, and learn more about School of Podcasting.
Yeah, as you might imagine, it's called the School of Podcasting, and the website is, you guessed it, schoolofpodcasting.com is where you can find all things School of Podcasting. If you want to find all things Dave, like the book behind me, and I should be selling these Christmas trees. They're kind of old in the tooth at this point, but that's over at powerofpodcasting.com. So, but really appreciate, this has been fun, man. It's always fun hanging out, talking about podcasts, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I got 2 quick plugs because I got to get rid of some shirts. I got the early bird special, $10 a shirt through the end of the year. You got 2 days left to get them. We got 4 colors, 5 sizes, Poduty shirts. We got Poduty hats. Everybody, you couldn't get enough on the shirt. You want to double brand yourself? Get your Poduty hats, just $15. And if anything that we talked about, whether the 6 stories in tonight's show or the 6 stories in the 35 other episodes I've released, that's over 200 examples of people doing live podcasts from a stage. We have a theater space here built just for independent podcasters. We have a no contract, no minimum way to do this where you're not on the hook for anything. Just reach out to me, Old Jeffers, Jeff at Poduty.com, PODUTY.com. And that's going to bring us to the end of the show. Dave, thank you again so much. I got one last question for you.
Oh, boy.
What time is it?
It's Poduty in the news time, baby.
What time is it?